But I was going to concentrate tonight on, some of you have asked me to do natural edge bowls, and then you also, half of you wanted to see how to make a square bowl. So we're going to do both in one piece. Now, when you're starting to think about designing things, once in a while you have that aha effect. This is the third time I've done this. 2 weeks ago I did it for the Ohio Valley Symposium after having made one the day before to make sure that I knew how to do this. So we may have some design opportunities tonight as we go through this. But what I wanted to show you is the basics of how to save the bark on a natural edge bowl. We may or may not be able to save the bark on a square bowl, on a square wing, that the bowl is going to go through. So this is something that I doubt that any of you have ever seen before. It's on this particular theme. And we'll talk about some of those once I get started. Parts. One thing you need to do when you start out making a natural edge bowl. First of all, determine where the top and the bottom are going to be. Now, if you're going to have bark on it, then this better be the top. And you do not want to drive it with a drive spur through the bark. Always take some sort of an implement of destruction. I had an interesting trip up to Wisconsin last year. First time I had flown with my tools and had my check baggage x-ray. What I carried to do that is a little 3/4 inch meat cleaver. Well, they were able to understand what that was, but what they wanted to know was, where was the rest of my ray gun? One-way jig. So I finally got through that and went up and did that, but I'd like to knock that off with either a hatchet or a meat cleaver. In this particular case, since I'm going to have a small bowl in the center, I used a spur bit. Now, mount it on the lathe, and in order to line it up correctly, you can use your tool rest to get it running pretty true. Like so, so that you have 4 fairly square corners. Now I said fairly square. This is not a precision axe. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is safety, of course. Now, I always wear tempered glasses. I've been a photographer for 40 years. I'm just paranoid about something happening to my eyes. In many cases, this is the thing, when you would be turning something like this, you should be wearing your face shield. I will at certain times, but the problem is it's very difficult to talk through a face shield. You can always tell somebody who wears a face shield not a lot, because they try to drink their coffee through it, or scratch their nose. But as you're roughing these things out, this will have bits of stuff flying off and it'll hit you. And if it were to be a big enough chunk, it could hurt you. So I advise, when you're roughing, always wear your safety equipment. Make sure everything is tight before you ever turn anything on. Make sure that a piece that is out of balance is started at a slow speed, not 3,600. That creates projectiles.
Tell me how to attach it to the chuck.
In this particular case, I do some production turning, and I almost always use a chuck. The drive spur is held in the jaws of the chuck. It's just a regular old 4-point drive spur. But this saves me having to take the spur out of the spindle, put the chuck on, take the chuck off. I can do all of this entire operation, which I will be doing, with the chuck in place. At home, that chuck very seldom ever comes off the lathe. And it's just one way to save a little bit of time when you're working or demonstrating or whatever you're doing. But it's very secure. It's not going anywhere. Those jaws are holding that regular jaw chuck, or that regular drive spur, in there very securely. As a matter of fact, One Way makes one that specifically fits it. So I'm not worried about it going anywhere. Yet. Vote of confidence. The basic tool of choice. The basic tool of choice is the 1/2-inch side ground bowl gouge. This is my 90% of the time weapon. Now, this is a kind of tool that you can use a lot. Back in the old days, before David Ellsworth stole the idea from E.M. O'Neill, and we now call it the Ellsworth grind, most of these bowl gouges were blunt across the end. This one is much more user-friendly, and many of you are using it. I hope all of you are keeping it sharp as well, because a lot of people say they can grind this one by hand. Forget it. Get the jig system, do it right, and then your gouges will last twice as long. Now I'm going to start roughing here. And because this is not perfectly balanced, you do want to make sure everything is tight. And make sure when you move your tool rest, you put down your tool, turn off the lathe, and uncheat and move the tool rest while the lathe is on. But I've been practicing for 20 years. So it doesn't make you any less stupid. Turn the lathe off. What I'm going to do in the first step, and I do most of my pieces in 3 steps,